Welcome to the Robertson and Easterling podcast. Thanks for listening. I'm Matt Easterling.
And I'm Craig Robertson. Matt and I are Mississippi divorce attorneys who work with real people with real life struggles. Helping them identify and achieve their goals is not only our job, it's our passion.
Even the thought of divorce is deeply personal and emotional for both sides, and you cannot ignore those feelings if you want to be healthy.
In our podcast, you'll hear stories from people who are further along in their journey. You will also learn from our network of professionals who would teach you about wellness despite your circumstances.
So sit back, relax, and take a deep breath. Everything is going to be okay. What you're about to hear is going to help.
All right, today's episode, we're talking about something that's real near and dear to me. I lost my dad 5 years ago, and he was 83. He was a man's man. He had big hands. He was left-handed, loved baseball, loved to garden, loved his tractor, loved his grandkids. And I've had this aspiration about telling the stories of dads. In my practice, in our practice, I meet so many inspiring dads, stepdads, biological dads, adopted dads, mentors, coaches, just people who father other people. And today, we've got just a great guest to talk about that.
And to talk on today's episode about the role of the modern father is Lee Smith. Lee is the founder and director of Cornerstone and has been counseling since 2006. Since beginning his counseling practice, he's worked with adolescents, families, and with married couples. Currently specializes in marriage and family dynamics, anxiety and depression, and working with those who serve in the ministry. Lee, thanks for being here today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here with you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Lee, tell us a little bit. I know that you're a dad. I think, we have three dads here. I think between the three of us, we have 6 kids. Talk about your family a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'd love to. So Jenny and I celebrated 20 years this year, which is crazy. Yeah, absolutely nuts. But we have 3 kids that we just love to death. Ford is our oldest. Ford's 13 years old. He's a 7th grader. And we have Millie, who's 10. And Millie's in the 5th grade. And we have Moses, who he's 7. And Moses is in the 1st grade. And man, I tell you, every day's full throttle around our house. It's exciting stuff.
Yeah, one of the things near and dear to my heart is adoption and caring for the fatherless. And some people who know me know that several years ago, my wife and I started an organization called 200 Million Flowers. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, you and another dear friend of ours was part of the inspiration for that. Mm-hmm. You have an adopted son. Tell us a little bit about that process and about your son.
Yeah, man, it's a crazy story. So probably sometime around 2009, 2010, Jenny and I had Ford and Millie at the time, and we really thought, gosh, we got our boy, we got our girl, we're set. We thought life was pretty much, was kind of carved and our path was straight from there. But we just started sensing around that time that there was just something more for us. And we really started kind of feeling our hearts called towards adoption. And Jenny and I had the other friend you were referring to, they were adopting at the same time. And just, I think through their journey and through just our own hearts, we began to feel like, man, this is something that's for us too. And so after a lot of thought, a lot of prayer, we began to pursue international adoption through Ethiopia. And from the time we placed our application on file to the time Moses came home was about a 3-year time frame. And it was a really challenging 3 years, but I tell you, the moment that you get to meet your son for the first time and he's actually placed in your hands and you get to bring him home, it's just a moment you'll never forget, and just makes it all worthwhile.
Wow. How old was Moses when he came to live with you?
Yeah, Moses was 6 months old when we got the referral, and then he actually came home when he was 8 months, so soon thereafter.
Yeah, one of the things that, we've talked to a former Chancery judge on our podcast, and he talked about the progression in the 24 years he was on the Chancery bench and how much more involved fathers have become. And Lee, you're a dad and you're a professional counselor. Mm-hmm. and have served in the ministry. Can you talk a little bit about how that intersects with your counseling practice?
Well, I think when you do what I do for a living, every day you have examples in front of you of some things that have gone really bad. And so it really keeps you honest as a dad. And I think every day I leave with even more of a desire to just get it right. I think I'm always aware that I'm on a clock when it comes to my kids. I mean, you get them for 18 years and then they're out. That 18 years, it really, I mean, you're getting closer and closer, Craig. So that 18 years flies by really quick. And so I think the word intentionality is what really comes to mind when I think about, how I spend my time with my kids. What do I want to do? What are the things I want to impress upon them? And just really, I think the biggest part is just learning to connect with their hearts and hearing from them.
Do you feel like you have noticed a change even in like your patients, the people that you see, where fathers are having a more active role inside the home?
Yeah, I think so, for sure. I think what you referred to the judge, what he had said, I think you do see that. More and more dads are wanting to spend time with their kids. And Craig, you and I were talking earlier about sometimes it's unfortunate, but it takes some tragedy sometimes to really reprioritize people's lives. And I think through divorce or just through some tragedy or just some difficult times in marriage, sometimes it can really reprioritize everything for you. And you see dads taking more of an active role with their kids. And that's really encouraging.
On our Instagram page several months ago, there was this graphic about how much custody time do dads get in various states. And I was really struck that in Mississippi, and I knew this, but it's when you see it graphically, it changes kind of the paradigm of your perspective. Something like dads, non-custodial dads, or dads who don't live in the same home as their kids enjoy like 23% of custodial time. And that's a stark contrast for like Colorado, for example, when it's a strict 50-50 determination. Mm. And of course, I am of the opinion that we as human beings get part of our identity from both our mom and our dad. And it's certainly vitally important for children to have the benefit of that. Generally speaking, there are certainly certain times when, one parent's simply not healthy, or one parent is suffering from some kind of chemical dependency or psychological condition that renders their parenting dangerous. Yeah. But most of the time, most kids are going to benefit from a relationship with mom and dad.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah, I think there are things that, the mother role, the father role, they're both critical. And I always say, femininity is the only thing that can bestow femininity, and masculinity is the only thing that can bestow masculinity. And they're just parts of the roles that moms and dads play that kids need both.
I used to write a blog, and I wrote an article one time about the super dad syndrome. And it's kind of like, all right, your world is falling apart, and there's disharmony between husband and wife. And there's this thing that happens when the family's kind of falling apart and mom and dad are disconnected. We see dads kind of step up to the plate. They become super dads. Whereas they didn't show up for the soccer games, all of a sudden they're showing up. Whereas they didn't take the kids to school or show up for a doctor's appointment, all of a sudden they're doing those things. Mm-hmm. And, in a conversation leading up to this podcast, we talked about that. And, it's not all bad when dads are taking a more important role, even when the family's unraveling.
Yeah. Craig, I think that as men, we're hardwired to lead our families and to invest in our kids in that kind of way. I think it's unfortunate sometimes, for a lot of different reasons, men pull back from that, though, whether that's passivity or just fear. Maybe they just are margined out because of things in their life that they get going on. But there's a hard wiring inside of us men. We want to jump in. We want to help. Men are always kind of, accused of trying to fix things all the time. And so it's unfortunate sometimes, you're right, that it takes a situation like that for that switch to get flipped. But I think it's in there. It's in all of us guys. It's a matter of, hey, what's it going to take to bring that out in you?
Well, I think sometimes, roles get defined in the home, and it can be very difficult to break out of those particular roles. So if you have a certain couple that starts doing things in a particular way, sometimes it takes that trauma or a big shakeup before, things change. And I know one thing I see from a lot of people is they even, will take it for granted to a degree. There's there's something to be said for just knowing that you can go home every night and see your child. And then the way that changes when somebody tells you that you can't, that you only get Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and it's going to be every other week. And it can really easily change your perspective on the whole thing.
Right. That's one thing that I tell people that, if you start walking through the process of divorce, we're all walking around with a suitcase full of civil liberties. I've got certain civil liberties, and I have the right to parent my kids. I have the right to vote. There are just things that I have the right to do. And we're carrying around our little suitcase full of civil liberties. But when you start walking through a divorce and you submit your life to the jurisdiction of a court, then you're going to take that little suitcase of civil liberties and you're going to set it on the courthouse steps. And whereas nobody can tell me, if I wanted to go pick up my kids today and take them to the movies or take them to get pizza, then I can do that. As a married person, I'm the joint legal and physical custodian of my kids. But once a judge makes a decision and there's a court order, then that changes. And, that's difficult for some people to understand. And I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think it's something about you. It's almost like you don't know what you got until it's gone. You don't fully appreciate the opportunities you have until those opportunities are removed from you. And then all of a sudden, the switch gets flipped and it can cause you to kind of go in overdrive as a dad or mom.
Hey guys, I'm your new friend Cassie. I'm a paralegal and the client care coordinator at Robertson and Easterling. Are things not working out for you at home? I am so sorry. What you need right now is honest feedback and wise counsel about how the legal system works in Mississippi and how it could impact your future. Click on the link on our website or just give me a call. After a meeting with one of our attorneys, you will feel like the weight of the world has been lifted from your shoulders and you'll have guidance about what you need to do next. When you're ready to talk, just give me a call. I would love to talk to you. The fact that you even spoke to me is totally confidential. Until then, take care and enjoy the second half of our show.
Talk about the dads that you see in your practice. What are the struggles of the modern father?
That's a great question. I think the struggles are various. I think that you got guys who most of them are either overworked, they've overextended themselves, whether that be in their jobs, extracurricular activities, trying to coach too many things, trying to do too many things. But a lot of guys that I see are margined out. A lot of guys have entertained things in their life for a long time, bad habits, addictions, different things that they've just allowed to kind of go under the surface. And now all of a sudden they're in a season of life where these things are really beginning to compete with their connection, not just with themselves, but with their kids, their wives, those types of things. But, I think a lot of times too, just men it's almost like a lot of men have been sung to sleep over time. I think there are a lot of things that are causes of that. But what I mean by that is just that, men have kind of fallen asleep on their roles in the home and just as a husband and as a dad. And they are distracted by so many things in life, from finances to social media to, health issues, just a lot of different stuff. There's a lot of different distractions there. So as you can see, there are a lot of pressures that are on the modern man today.
In your professional opinion, what do children need from their fathers in the home today?
I think kids more than ever, they need authenticity. They need a dad that can sit with them and be engaged with them and just be authentic with them, meaning just to be truthful about life. I think most kids today are growing up in a very technological world. I read a statistic the other day that children between the ages of 12 to 17 spend on average about 20 hours a week on technology. And 90% of that time is spent on social media like Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok. I think the problem with a lot of that, it just presents a world to our kids that, hey, if it's not the prettiest thing, you can filter it up, fix it up, doctor it up, and then present this perfect product out there for people to like. And it sends this message that you have to have it all together for you to be loved and accepted. And I think dads have an incredible opportunity just to model, hey, you don't. I love you just the way you are. You don't have to fix anything up. You don't have to filter yourself, whatever it is. But, I actually enjoy sharing some of my failures with my kids. I want them to know I don't have all the answers. I don't have it together. And it's almost like you see them sit back, Matt, and they just they get some encouragement from that, that it almost gives them a more freedom to kind of make mistakes and just be who they are.
My dad was, like I said, was a man's man, and later in his life, he had some vascular health issues, and his left leg was amputated right below his knee. And I mean, it was obviously a big surgery. And I can remember after the surgery, I held my dad's hand, I looked into his eyes, and he had these just smoky gray eyes. And I was just real proud because, he basically made the decision whether or not he was going to live or whether he's going to die, because had he not had the surgery, then, he wouldn't have lived. And he did live a couple of years after he had his leg amputated. And I said, Dad, I'm just so proud of you. And he looked me back square in the eyes and said, son, I'm proud of you. And just that blessing of a father. I mean, one of the greatest moments of my life is just receiving that blessing. And it's biblical, really.
Yeah, it really is. I think that's, Craig, that's a great word. I find that my words as a dad carry more weight to them than I will ever realize. And sometimes I don't even take in consideration what I'm saying or how I'm saying it, but my kids are filtering my words all day, every day. And just the stewardship of our words, I think, is critical.
Something that I feel like I hear, unfortunately, I think there are dads out there that think that the relationship with their children is something that can develop once they're a little bit older. And maybe they don't invest as much time in it when they are super young. What does the research say about, at what age your children start picking up on that authenticity and your presence and things of that nature?
I think it starts really young. I don't know if I can pinpoint an age, but I know it's really, really young, Matt. I always say kids are keen observers, but they're poor interpreters. And meaning they observe their world around them very well, but they're extremely poor interpreters. They can't make sense of what they're seeing sometimes. So, children even as age of 2 and 3 and 4, they can pick up on things in a home. And kids are what we call in counseling language egocentric, meaning kind of the whole world revolves around them. And so when you have a kid that's going through like a divorce or something like that, oftentimes you will see that child begin to look inward and ask questions about, well, what's wrong with me? It's that egocentric kind of thinking. It's about them. What did I do wrong? What can I do to stop this? And so kids from a very early age, they begin to pick up on some of these things.
Moving forward with that, I mean, how we were talking about the things that children need out of their dad these days. A child whose parents maybe are going through some type of disruption or a divorce, is there anything extra that they need?
I think just extra of all those things. It's extra time with them, extra touches, extra check-ins. I think it's important that spouses going through divorce should never speak, negatively about the other spouse to the kids. Find things about that spouse that you can still respect and admire about them, even if it's just the fact that, hey, we're going to be your parents for life regardless. But find those things and never speak, disparagingly of the other spouse, and try to always communicate your love for them and that, hey, mom and I, dad and I, we're still a team. We're still a team and we'll be for life.
Yeah, and that's the difficult thing, because let's just be honest, a lot of people just flat out don't get it. I tell people that, when I tuck my kids in bed at night, I can whisper in their ear life, and I can tell them how beautiful they are and how smart they are, or I can say, what a crazy person their mama is. And, that certainly is internalized by kids, because like we talked about before, they get a piece of their identity from mom and from dad.
Right.
And if mom is bad, then I feel bad, then I'm bad. And the same thing with dad, if there's something wrong with dad, then maybe there's something wrong with me.
That's right. Yeah, I think too, we talked about words being really powerful in a kid's life, and they are. I think don't ever underestimate too just your presence in their life. Your presence is powerful. Kids long for you just to sit with them, and you don't even have to really do anything spectacular. I remember asking Ford a couple years ago, he's my oldest. I said, hey buddy, what's something I can do to show you my love with my time with you? And you know what he said? He said, would you download this app on your phone and play this game with me? And I thought, wow, that's all it takes for him. And so I downloaded the game and we played the game together. And you would have thought I just gave the kid $1 million. It's just my presence with him is really, really powerful. And I would say this too: the single biggest event in your kid's life every day is when you walk through the door at night, whether you realize it or not. It's the biggest event of their day. And how you handle that, how you steward that, if you come in on your phone, if you're dropping your work bag, if you're just kind of, going through the motions. I mean, they pick up on that. They're keen observers,
And I think that's something that dads who are facing the reality that they might not be with their kids as often as they would like when facing a divorce that's a challenge for them because, I like to tell people that, your time with your kids is going to be different. You might not be there every Tuesday evening, but, you really got to make the most of the time that you do have with them. So sometimes, a dad who maybe he does have standard every other weekend visitation, what he does with that time is critically important. And that doesn't mean that he can't show up at, karate practice, or he can't be on the sideline of the baseball field, or like me, show up at the volleyball court, or to watch my daughter cheer at the football games. Sometimes part of, as you pointed out, words are important, but showing up is important too. My dad was a man of few words, but he showed up.
Yeah.
If I were playing the game, he was on the sidelines. At the big events, he was there, and that's something that I think modern dads who are struggling through the process of divorce have to reevaluate and reassess what that looks like to them.
What would be something important for maybe the modern mother in the home to know about fathers and what, their children need from their dad?
Yeah, I think just understanding that their role isn't more important. It's a critical role. And, it's funny. I tell the ladies in my office all the time, you need to understand the most fragile thing in your house. It's not your china. It's your man's ego. And you need to understand that he needs support. He needs to be encouraged, to encourage him in his role. Because again, what we said earlier is true. He's wired to do this. He wants to do this, but he may need encouragement. He may need you from time to time just to point out, hey, you're doing a great job with this.
We live in a digital world, Lee, and a common theme among the men and women that I visit with in my office are struggles around pornography. Can you comment on that as it relates to the plight of the modern man?
Yeah. I think to understand pornography, you have to understand how we're wired. And we're wired for intimacy. When I talk about intimacy in my office with people, men usually think sex. But sex is just an expression of intimacy, right? So intimacy, when you think about the word intimacy, break it down into me, see. We are wired to be known fully and to be loved fully. And oftentimes in marriages, what you begin to see is kids get introduced into the picture. And some of the things that couples were able to do just readily and freely in their marriage at one point in time are much more difficult to do, and the demands are different. And sometimes that intimacy gets broken down in marriage. And there's no longer that connection that used to be there. This is a common thing I hear a lot. And what men use pornography for is false intimacy. It gives them a quick kind of surge, it gives them an adrenaline rush. It gets them over the hump of not feeling connected. And that pornography comes in and it provides them a little hit of dopamine, and this guy likes what he's experiencing, but yet he feels so much shame about what he's experiencing oftentimes. And that shame is the gasoline that compels him to go back again, because then he begins to become more hidden with his wife. He feels more disconnected with her. Oftentimes he becomes angry with her. And you see this vicious cycle begin to unfold. And so when intimacy too, this is interesting, when intimacy between a husband and wife begin to break down, you also see intimacy usually between the father and the kids break down too. And so that relationship between husband and wife is so critical. And I would say to any of your listeners who pornography is a part of the home, whether that's the man or it's the wife, 20% of online viewers now are women, actually. So if that's the case, find someone safe to talk about it with, get it out in the open. It's like fungus. You bring it out in the light, fungus begins to die. You keep it in the dark, it grows out of control. Bring it into the light, talk to someone about it. And there is such help for this, but we love to try to help men and women find healthy ways of staying connected. And there's some great things we can do with that.
Right. So the longing is for connection and for intimacy, and the pornography is a false source for that.
It's a Band-Aid.
And the shame associated with the false source of intimacy drives them further into the dark and creates further disconnection and a further need for the medication. And what we're describing is the addiction cycle.
You got it. That's how it happens. Yeah.
Lee, thanks so much for being here today. As we start to wrap things up, are there any practical guidance that you can give dads?
Yeah, something I try to do every day between my commute home from the office to my driveway, it's about a 25-minute commute for me. So if your dad's out there listening, if you don't have a 25-minute commute, you may need to find a parking lot somewhere close to home to do this. But I encourage you to just turn your radio off, put the cell phone up, and deal with what my mentor calls the gnats. The gnats are all the things you didn't get done today, the things you got to get done tomorrow. Just have some mind space where you can kind of process through all the things you've got going on in your personal life. In other words, connect in with yourself first. You can't go home and connect with your wife and your kids if you're not connected with you first. That's most important. Spend time with yourself and, to just speak spiritually just for a second. I try to ask a very simple thing. It's a prayer. I just say, God, help me do what I'm about to do better than I've done anything all day today. Because the reality is, I don't want my family to suffer. I don't want to give my best away to my clients all day and then have leftovers for my family. And if you guys are like me, I drive up some days and I'm oftentimes on empty and I don't need a full tank to go in the house. I just need like a fourth of a tank to get me through the rest of the night. But my goal is, and my challenge to the guys listening is, man, go to bed every night exhausted, worn out, giving out everything you had today, rest your body, get up, refuel your heart, your mind, and go at it again the next day.
What's the best way, Lee? Because this is a challenge that I have. And, I'm kind of one of these, I've got, kind of like my daughter, I've got two speeds. I've got on and off. Talk to the dads out there and maybe talk to me too about how do dads refuel? I mean, what is it that we do to fill things up? Because we're in the helping business, you're in the helping business, I'm in the helping business. And so a lot of times we see, that we're pouring ourselves out for our client. And that's what they want us to do. That's what they need from us. And that's what we're there. And that's how we're hardwired. But, some dads, spend too much time in, filling themselves up. But I think for myself, I don't spend enough. So what thoughts would you have around how dads can refuel so that we can give our best to our families?
Yeah, I think it's different for every dad. I think every dad's got to figure out what that thing is for them. That's a good question that you ask. What is it when I do it recharges me? For me, it's going for a ride. It's reading a book. I love the outdoors, going for a bike ride, whatever it may be, going to the gym. Find your thing, whatever it is for you, and make it a priority. And the thing we said earlier is true. You don't need 3 hours of doing that. Oftentimes, it's just 30 minutes, 45 minutes. And I would say just try to make that a routine thing. I think most guys, if we're honest, we feel guilty. We feel like, hey, if I go do that, I'm cheating my family somehow, or my wife's going to have to do extra if I'm not there. And a lot of guys I talk to say, man, I just don't want to do that. I feel like I'm being selfish. Well, think about the opposite. If you don't do that, you're going to burn out. And then what good are you going to be for your family? So think of it as going and sharpening your axe for the purposes of going back in and chopping more and being more effective.
Well, I think it's probably important for spouses to make sure they're supportive of, their significant other taking that time to refuel. So not just the dads, but also the moms, because I know they can get burned out too. And if you don't feel like you have permission or you're not being supported in that, I think it can be hard to do.
Yeah, you're right, man. I would say that's a great conversation to have with your wife, just to say, hey, I feel like I don't have permission, or maybe I do. I just need you to voice that to me. But when she does, and I haven't met a wife yet that hasn't given her husband permission to do that, make sure you balance that back and say, hey, what do you need? What can I do to fight for you? And just create this environment in your home where you both fight for each other for that. It's critical.
Lee, thanks so much for being here today. I know that this episode is going to be enjoyed by a lot of different people. Where can people find you to get more of your brilliant insight?
Yeah, appreciate that, Matt. We are located in Jackson at Highland Village and in Oxford, right across from the new Malco Theater at Oxford Commons. You can check us out at www.cornerstone.ms.
You've been listening to the Robertson and Easterling podcast. Thanks for spending time with us.
We'd love to hear from you if you need our help. You can request a consultation from our website in less than 5 minutes. If you liked our show, please subscribe to our podcast so you'll be one of the first to know when our next episode drops.
Have a great rest of your day, and remember, there's nothing wrong with arming yourself with information. On behalf of Matt and our entire team, thanks for listening. This podcast is not a substitute for an attorney. All information is provided as a general reference and public service. Listening to this podcast does not create a professional relationship with Robertson and Easterling or any of its attorneys or guests. This podcast may be considered advertising under applicable rules, and therefore free background information is available upon request. For a full disclaimer, please visit our website, www.robertson.ms.